Hi, everybody. This is Michael from Two Dudes in a NES podcast, and you are listening to Two Dudes in a SNES. No, that's not right. You're listening to the SNES podcast.
At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your hosts, Soulblazer and George.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Super NES podcast. This is episode number 44. Yeah, long time ago. 64 for your listening pleasure. I am Greg, joined as always by George.
Hi.
And George picked a real doozy for it to cover. This is probably a game very few people out there have even heard of, even fans of the genre. So this would be interesting to cover. We're looking at in this episode an obscure fighting game called Street Combat, which is developed and published by NCS in Japan in 1992, and the US version was published by IREM the following year. So this is a fighting game, not a genre that I have the most experience with. I like some fighting games. It's not my favorite genre. I know George probably has a little bit more affinity for the genre than I do, but
I'm probably about the same as you, to be honest.
So, how did you hear about this really obscure, unusual, very strangely ported over, which we'll get to in a moment here, game anyway?
The internet. For some reason, interesting games really catch my eye, and when I find something I'm interested in, I just take a look at it. This was definitely something I wanted to take a look at.
So, you never played this slightly before in the past either, before this podcast?
No.
Interesting. Okay. Well, then you're getting both of our pretty much our first impressions on this. We talk about it. But so the history of this game is kind of interesting, actually. I think the history of this game is probably more interesting than the game itself, because of the fact that it had a very interesting porting process. When the game came over to the West, as I alluded to before. The game was developed and published by a small Japanese company called NCS in 1992, and they clearly were capitalizing on it. They clearly were capitalizing like on the Street Fighter 2 fame, because I think Street Fighter 2 would come out either the previous year in the arcades or just come out previously. So the game was still pretty new, and that brought about a whole slew of fighting wannabe games to imitate it, and this game's no exception. However, the game was more popular in Japan than it was here in the West because in Japan, the game was attached to a very popular, long-running anime and manga series like Japan, which people now in the West recognize. This was originally like a Rama game, so that's interesting because I don't think the show had even probably very few people in the West knew about it. At this time, during the 90s, there was very little anime that was actually available here, properly translated for U.S. consumption. So, when the game was brought over to the States, they just dropped the license and made some tweaks to the game, which we'll talk about here later on, because nobody here in the West heard about the series, so why bother? So,
do you think it's the reason that Ranma can the main character there can change between a boy and a girl. Do you think that's the main reason why?
Yes and no. I do remember the show causing a little bit of controversy when it finally did start becoming available over here, but they've gone back and forth on that with some of the spin-offs. Like some of the spin-offs, his gender is more, or her gender, I should say, is more established, i.e., it doesn't change during the course of the spin-off. So I think those have probably gotten to more popular success like over here. No, because I think that Westerners, those who really do like anime stuff, probably love the wackiness of it and just the whole craziness, I like the whole concept. I mean, like Japanese embracing something whole hog that would have a hard time flying over here. So
right, but I'm imagine if they just took the game, right? They translated everything. It's just the same game, but it's English, and you read in the manual that the character can change between a girl and a boy. I think parents would have problems thinking that something like their children would become confused or the devil is after them or something.
Yeah.
So I think that might have been one of the reasons why they wanted to change it. But, I honestly don't see a reason why they should have released it at all. Considering all the work that they did, I want to say at least 80% of the game, probably more, has been changed. And it's not a very good game. So let's be honest.
Yeah, spoilers.
Sorry.
I think it's a good point. I think there's several reasons that the game got changed, and that's probably like one of them. Nowadays, this game could probably be released with no problems, but 20 years ago...
Oh my god, it would sell a lot of copies.
Yeah. Well, 20 years ago, this would have been like a hard sell. But
right, because the media it was attached to, the license it was attached to, was not really a thing over here. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I can see why they would want to change it for some of those reasons, but I don't feel like it was worth it to even try.
So the Japanese name of this game, and I'm going to try this, but probably like butcher it horribly, was Rama Half Chonai Getsogen. And when IREM picked up the rights to the game to publish it here in the West, they made, as George alluded to, a lot of changes to the game. All the characters got replaced, so they were all renamed. And in some cases, they were also given in some cases the movesets was also changed on some of them.
Right.
The graphics were also significantly changed. The control scheme was very slightly changed. Well, that's common for games ported over here because Japanese gamers tend to have the buttons in a different configuration than what we have here in the West. So there's also the PlayStation with a lot
oh, that's fun going back to those old games.
Yes.
And realizing that X and circle are swapped.
Yes. So IREM themselves has a pretty interesting history. IREM was during the 80s one of the biggest publishers of arcade games here in the West. They published a lot of their most famous games. Famous games like probably Kung Fu Master, which got ported to the NES as Kung Fu, and the R-Type franchise. But IREM stopped. But IREM closed down their video game division back in April of 2011. So nowadays,
wait, that recent?
Yes.
Wow.
So nowadays, nowadays they're doing a Konami. They're just focused upon online gaming and slot machines.
Pachinko machines.
Pachinko machines, yes.
You gotta make that Metal Gear Solid pachinko.
Curious for IREM to decide to publish the game over here in the West. I think because of the fact that they probably... I think because, like I said before, I think they were just counting upon the fact how fighting games were so popular over here at the time. So why not? So and they probably got the rights for it pretty cheap because the license was no longer associated with it.
Probably.
So the U.S. release came out in April of 1993. And it was not a big seller. It did not review very well. The average review of the game on a 5-star scale will put the game anywhere between like 1 to 3 stars. As far as the the quality of the game. The plot, very basic. Your typical fighting plot. The main character decides he wants to test his strength by challenging all his rivals.
Steven. His name is Steven.
Yep.
They didn't even try.
Yep, renamed from Rama. Well, they didn't try they didn't try in a lot of things either. The game title itself is just generic. I mean, it's like street combat. That's like the most Teflon, impossible to remember name I can think about. Like for a fighting game.
I know.
So it's like I kept having to look up what the name of the game was, but I couldn't remember what it was called.
Don't worry, I did that too.
Very basic. The controls of the game, I think, are one of the best things about the game. The controls are very simple. I mean, they're very basic Street Fighter-like controls.
But they're still very poor.
Well, they're poor because of hit detection and because of the response speed, not because of the controllers themselves, I think.
It feels a little, like, stiff.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, when I'm talking about, like, the speed, that's kind of what I meant. Because, like,
Okay.
it seems to, yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with the layout of the controller. I mean, you have a punch button, a kick button, a jump button, a jump button.
Yes.
Like a special button.
I want to bring that up. There's a jump button. It's not up. There's a specific button to jump.
I prefer games that give you a jump button because I hate games that have you push up to jump. I've never really been a fan of those.
No. Like platformers and stuff that use up to jump, that's terrible. But in a fighting game, usually the jump button is up. Like, it was so disorienting for me to have a specified jump button.
Well, they may have been doing it that way because they're trying to free up the control pad for some of the special moves. Maybe I mean, like, I'm guessing here, but yeah. So you also have a block. You also have a low block, like in a throw, and so each of the characters has their own special moves. They're very, on the positive side, I will point out positive things about this game as I come across them. I like the special moves. They're simple to learn.
I like the backgrounds.
Yeah. The graphics for this game are a mixed bag. On the bright side, they're very, on the bright side, the graphics are very colorful. There's a lot of detail going on, like in the background, like George just said. The character fights themselves are fairly large. They're not as big as Street Fighter counterparts, but they're like a good size.
But it's so weird because the backgrounds look good, but then the character sprites kind of look like almost like clip art or something.
I was just gonna say the whole overall look of the game is kind of like a cheap cartoon to me.
Yeah.
As far as the actual look goes, the game is okay graphically, but it's not as sharp and impressive as like Street Fighter or any other major fighting game that was out like this time. But it's a very curious graphical choice, I thought. But who knows?
You want to talk more about graphics? Look at the resolution of the game. If you play this in an emulator, you have the native resolution of the game, and they programmed it incorrectly, so it's tall and skinny. It's very weird. You won't notice it if you play it on like an actual SNES on a TV because it just squishes it down.
Right.
But they messed up the resolution on this game, which is basically a sign of either they didn't care or they didn't know what they're doing, but I think it's the first one because it's Irem. They have experience.
They weren't doing a lot of console games like this. The console games like this point outside of the R-Type series. I don't know. Maybe they did farm the project off to some inexperienced people because they knew.
I don't know.
But so
it's like I was reading up on it before I was playing it, and I was like, oh, and I went to play and I was like, oh. So it was really interesting. it felt like I was playing some kind of special arcade game that had like a special type of screen you had to use or something.
So combat's mixed bag. Like George said, it kind of feels a bit stiff. Like it's a bit slow sometimes, I think. Combat definitely here is not as quick or fluid as, like, say, for example, in Street Fighter, like a Mortal Kombat game.
Also, it's very unfair because you have a limited range and your enemies have just like they can attack you from a pretty far distance, and you can't really reciprocate that far away, and it's terrible. I found myself having to jump around and just screw around just to finally get somebody into a pattern or something.
Yeah, well, that's common with fighting games. I think it's kind of like worse here for some reason. They really want to make the game difficult.
Which was so weird because the AI wasn't good. It was just very cheap.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they would wait till you just get back up and use the same like long range attack on you.
Yeah, like later games later fighting games would take away that. I believe it was called like a cheese move, or basically like your focus is kept using on you again and again and again. So, but that definitely could happen to you here, unfortunately. But
yeah, I mean, you can fool the AI too, but
yeah,
and that's usually you usually figure out how to fool it before it fools you.
Right.
But it's still, it's annoying.
Yeah. Well, if you know what you're doing, though, you can get through the game like pretty fast. There's a long play. The long play video for this on YouTube is 15 minutes.
I like how it's called a long play.
They always call it long play, regardless of how.
Well, I know. It's just funny.
Yeah. So, on the bright side, I do think the characters had some very interesting moves. Each of the playable fighters does have their own unique suite of special moves and combos that you can use, which is pretty nice. So, I do appreciate that.
I wanted to ask you something. I forget what character was it? What was his name? G.I. Jim or something like that?
Yeah.
When you defeat him, he cries. Do you think that was blood in the the original game? Because the way that it just drips out and it pools, and it's so weird. It's so awkward. Like, why have that?
Well, I don't know which characters were which in the Japanese version of the game, so I can't tell you for sure.
There's a few websites that actually point out the localization changes.
Yeah. So
it's actually an interesting read because there are a few characters that actually aren't that different from the original. Like there's one that I think only the hair color was changed or something like that, or something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Japanese version of the game also. The Japanese version of the game definitely has a lot of differences. I mean, really, they changed the game so much, like it's almost like two different games. So
almost, yes.
But and unfortunately, we did not get the better version of the game like over here in the West. But the music is fine. I mean, it's not great. It's not horrible.
It's totally forgettable for me. I cannot remember a single track.
Yeah. It's not great fighting music. Again, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, they have some really good. Music pieces associated with it. Yes. This game is just not, for whatever reason. So I will also say on the bright side that once you adjust the enemy's cheating and cheapness factor, this game's not overly difficult. I could see this game kind of being like a decent intro level fighting game for somebody to start off with. To get used to how fighting games operate before they graduate onto more complicated advanced games like those Street Fighter series. Because the combos are pretty easy to learn and pull off. The control scheme, like I said before, is simple. It's not the best fighting game, but I think the best thing I could say about it is that, for like a beginner's game, somebody to to cut your teeth on, to figure out how things operate and to get better at them. This is serviceable to like that respect, I think.
I guess. I'm not like a super fighting game guy, so I wouldn't know what would be like the best to start on.
Well, I was able to beat the game.
It's definitely like a beginner's kind of game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was able to beat it, so I'm making so I'm pretty bad at fighting games usually. So that says that's saying something. But
do you know how they got around the whole boy-girl thing for the localization?
Yeah, they just changed the characters.
No, they took his armor off. So when you play, you start as Steven with armor, which is like generic, like futuristic armor or whatever. And then like when you go, and there's a 2-player mode where you can actually fight against Steven himself, but he's not wearing armor, and it's like, what is it? He's like wearing basically just like a tank top and just like sweatpants or something with like just generic gloves or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Oh my god. And the lines that he says every time he beats somebody is just so terrible. Like when I was playing through this game, I was laughing throughout the whole way because it's just so bad.
Yeah, well, again, translation. They couldn't just do a straight translation because it's a Rama game.
No, but I'm pretty sure they
Yeah.
could have thought of something that wasn't so cheesy and dumb.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like they didn't try. It was just like, oh, he's fighting. I can't even think of any of the lines he's saying. He says in the game. That's how forgettable they are because they're just so terrible. Like, why don't you go home or something? It's like why do you even try? Why put text there? I think the last person you fight is a woman. He's like, yeah, don't you like me now, babe, or something like that. It's like, really? It's something stupid like that. Video games.
Yes. Especially video games like this Erok.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't mention the 2-player option. That's a nice thing that this game has, at least.
It's basically Double Dragon on the NES mode. Was it mode B or whatever?
Yeah.
You're just basically fighting like as the same character.
Yeah.
But the other version.
Yeah.
Is the second player.
True enough.
There's nothing special. You both have the same moves, I think. I did not even bother to try playing as second player. I just wanted to take a look at the mode.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was an interesting look back at the early '90s when the fighting games were all the rage, and certainly we've already covered before in this podcast the quintessential fighting game on the system, Street Fighter 2, and now we're covering a pretty bad example of a fighting game. So there's like yin and yang balance for this at least. So that's something to be said.
Yep.
But I mean, I already pretty much said the good things. Good things I liked about the game. What few things that were there. How about on your end, George? I mean, I think you liked. I remember you saying that you liked some of the. I remember you saying that you liked some of the graphics and some of the backgrounds. Was there anything else?
I mean, what I liked about the game?
Yes.
It was entertaining. Not in the way that they wanted it to be, but it was still entertaining. This game almost hit a bootleg game trigger for me, and if you know me, I'm really into bootleg cartridge games Famicom and Super Famicom and Genesis, stuff like that, or Mega Drive, whatever.
Right.
Bootleg games are really into, and it's just this was so close to hitting the trigger for the oh, this is a bootleg game. It was almost like that.
Right.
I had to double check and make sure this wasn't a bootleg game. I'm honest. I'm being honest about that.
No, this got a real US release with a boxing manual and everything, but and this game is not very expensive to pick up either, which we'll cover here in a moment, for reasons I'm sure you can understand. So, So was there anything else about the game that you really liked?
Not really. I liked how it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, I said, I understand. We already talked about why they stripped the license and made some change to the game, like the US release. Fine, that's been done before many, many times, like many other games. But they changed so much, bringing the game over to the West, that they pretty much just like. It's like somebody like gives you like this like perfectly ripe banana, but you can't tells you can't eat the banana until 3 days have passed. I think it's gone rotten.
That's an interesting analogy, but all right, I'll follow.
The rotten banana, like, is what we got here on the U.S. side. I don't know. They didn't have to change this much of the game. All they really had to do was just kind of like change the characters, change the dialogue, and just like and that's it. Just like stop the game over that way. So I don't understand why the game got butchered as much as it did. I tried the Japanese version.
I wouldn't even say like changing the characters. I feel like you could fit those in still. Just like change the story so like, oh, it's his sister or something like that. You know,
well,
like because they did that with other stuff that came over here.
Yeah, well, the sprites had to be changed because the sprites are all like part of the anime, and that's part of the license, so they had to change that. So I understand.
Oh, that's right.
So I understand why they did that, but they could have probably just made small changes to the sprite, maybe like change a hair color here, change a uniform there. They didn't have to radically change everything about it. So, but I don't know.
I don't know. We can sit here and speculate for a few hours.
Yes. And nobody has the answers to this, unfortunately, because nobody cares about this game. Like, for good reason.
Yeah, no, there's a good reason why people don't care.
Curiously enough, in Japan, this game had a bunch of cheat codes associated with it. Most of those are exclusive to the Japanese version of the game, there, however, and they're not present like in this one. For example, the Japanese version of the game had two hidden characters. It allows you to play as the other fighter like in allows you to do like player versus player combat, both people are doing the same character.
Okay.
It also had a code to give you. It also had a code to give you 50 credits. And all this got stripped out of the U.S. version. The only codes. I'm sorry. They did leave in the 50 credit mode in the U.S. version, but they changed the combination.
You don't even need it.
Yeah, but they changed how to execute it in the U.S. version for some reason. I don't know why, but whatever.
They thought they were cool. I don't know.
They did, however, leave in a code for additional difficulties. So there are two more difficulty levels that you can access that they access by using this code. One super easy, one super hard.
I feel bad for anybody who's rented this game.
Oh, this is a perfect rental. This is like the kind of game that you just. That you like rent, play for like half an hour, throw off to the side, and don't touch it again.
Yeah, for half an hour, probably maximum. But that, like, if you're a kid and you get rentals, like that must stink, because you wasted your one rental for the weekend or whatever on this one game that was not very good, and you beat very quickly.
Right.
It's a shame.
Well, hopefully you rented other games with this one.
Yeah, some people can.
Depending like what was in the store, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So because of that, we already alluded to the fact that this game's pretty cheap to get as far as like Super NES our games go. I I found about 18 copies of the game that are currently listed on there for sale. 17 copies like recently sold. These prices as always include shipping. Card only can range anywhere from $4.45 to $14.40.
Wow.
And CIB, there were 2 copies of CIB that recently sold. One for $17.50 and one for $33.60.
That is too much. That is way too much.
Well, that one was also mint condition and included all the ads and inserts and everything else that came with the game. The 7050 copy of the game only had the box, the game, and the manual.
That might still be slightly too much.
Well, collectors, if you're trying to get something complete, like your catalog, then. But anyway, I can't see paying $5 for this game though. I mean, it's okay to
exactly.
I played it. I played it for half an hour. I was fine with it for half an hour, and that's it. I never want to go back to it again. There's no reason to go back to it. There's no reason to go back to it again.
I know, right?
Yeah. So. I guess George was trying to punish me for being away last time.
No, it would have taken me forever to find a game like that, but I would have found one. If anything, I feel like I'm punishing myself for some reason.
If you're a fighting game fan, this game could be worth checking out. Checking out out of the curiosity, just to see how bad fighting games can get. I will say this is not the worst fighting game I've played. I have played fighting games that are worse.
Oh, yeah, like stuff like Pit Fighter or something.
Pit Fighter was only good in the arcade. The arcade version of the game is pretty good.
The console versions were.
Yeah.
There's a Jaguar fighting game that is terrible. I think it's called Kasumi Ninja.
Kasumi Ninja's okay. Fight for Life is pretty bad. That was the last Jaguar US release.
Whew.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about the Atari Jaguar right now.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. I was trying to think about if I had anything else to say about this game, and I really don't. It's just interesting. Just again, an interesting sign of the times. There's a popular craze that comes out. There are a bunch of good clones that come out, and then for every good clone, there's about 10 crappy ones, and this is definitely a crappy one.
At least 10, maybe more.
Yeah. So, but like I said, fighting games may be curious. Fighting game fans may be curious checking this out. Beginning fighting game people may be okay playing this one for a little bit to hone their skills before moving on to a better game, hopefully. But the Japanese version of the game is definitely better. If you're a fan of the anime or just want to check out a very weird Japanese fighting game, check out the Japanese version of this game. I guarantee you have a lot more enjoyment with that version than you will with this one.
Don't worry, there's another game that came out in North America that was actually attached to the license, so maybe we'll cover that soon enough.
Oh, which one?
There was another one. I forget what it's called, but there were only 2 that came out over here. That had anything to do with that license.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think they came out with a GBA game as part of the license a while back, but...
Oh, did they?
Maybe. I'm trying to remember. I may be confusing that with something else. But, so... Anyway, that's final thoughts. George, you have anything else to say about the game?
Not really.
Yeah, good luck remembering the name of the game. Even within within an hour listening to this, because you probably won't.
Yeah, we just covered Combat Street.
Yeah, exactly. Well, combat commentary actually sounds better.
It does. Also, look out for the sequel, Combat Avenue.
Yeah. So, anyway, next time in the podcast, we're again checking out a game that neither one of us looks like has played yet. This time, like we might pick, and I'm crossing my fingers. This game is not going to be as bad as the game that we just covered. I knew about this game's existence, but I never played it, so I'm very curious to see how it holds up, because I've heard some good things about it. We're going to be looking at the spiritual sequel, I suppose is the best way to call it. A very popular and classic computer game, like in the early 80s, Choplifter 3. Which is kind of basically like Choplifter, but with like stages and mini bosses added. So, So I'm looking forward to checking that one out finally after all these years. Again, this podcast is very good for getting me to motivating me to look at games that I just probably would have ignored in the back of the library because the library's like so freaking big.
Yeah, same thing for PlayStation Power, our PlayStation podcast.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, and I believe, and George, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were saying off mic that you have a little bit of experience, just like the original Choplifter.
Not too much. There's a Master System version. Yeah.
Sega several years later ported the game to the arcades. One of only 2 games I'm aware of that started out life as a computer game, and then later on they ended up to being ported over to the arcades.
Yeah, that's always something interesting.
Yeah, Pitfall was the other one that I'm aware of. So, but
oh really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, kind of a combination of Pitfall 1 and 2. Like, it's a weird game.
Right.
Yeah, not that great. Again, Sega was the one who did the arcade version of that, so they like doing that stuff. But, so anyway, thank you very much all for checking this out. Again, we always appreciate it. We are a proud member of both the Retro Junkies and Throwback Networks, where you can find many other great retro gaming and non-gaming related podcasts. Please check us out on iTunes and give us a rating on there. It's always appreciated. If you have any questions, feedbacks, comments, etc., you can email me directly at the SNES podcast yahoo.com. You can also contact us on our Facebook page. And George, how can the good listeners check it a hold of you if you're so inclined?
Oh boy, if you use Twitter, you can find me on there. That's at Mr. Chief, at MISTURCHEEF. The reason why I don't want to talk about Jaguars is if you look at my Twitter, you'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, I posted a video, very interesting. I'll tell you about it later, Greg. But on top of that, I do other podcasts. I do PlayStation Power with Greg, where we cover PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games, but I also do Master System Masterpieces, where we cover Master System games. And I also do the box for it, where a buddy and I sit down and talk, and oh boy, do we talk. That's fun.
Yes, and that show is definitely not family friendly. But everything else, that one's not, and the PlayStation podcast is not, but everything else is.
Yep.
So, but definitely George. George does a lot of podcasting stuff, so I don't know how he finds time for all this, but he does. So
I don't have a job, Greg. That's why.
Well, I was trying to be nice about it, but
no. Sometimes the truth hurts, Greg, and we have to talk about the truth. But no, I mean, even when I was working, I had the time for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just a crazy supernatural being, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay then. Thank you. Thank you again for everybody out there listening to this. We are hoping to have some guest hosts coming on the podcast pretty soon. Those are always very hard to nail down because of scheduling conflicts and whatnot. But hopefully, we have some more of them pretty soon. Hopefully,
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed Joe filling in for me last episode when I was on vacation. We'll have to have. we will have to have him back at some point. George, have a proper three-person discussion on a game.
Oh, sure.
But so I'm sure there's got to be another game in the library he likes.
Probably. I mean, he's really enjoying that Super Nintendo I got him.
But okay. Alrighty. Thank you again, once again, for giving us a small part of your day. We very much appreciate you listening to this podcast, however you download it or stream it or whatever. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, if you're in a cold part of the country, as I am digging out from 9 inches of snow yesterday, stay safe and stay warm, and we'll catch you guys later.
Goodbye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man. Now you're playing with power. Steampunk power.